This is the Dollemore Daily, and I'm Jesse Dollemore. It has been a huge week relative to news on the insurrection front, related to the investigation into the January 6th attempted overthrow of the United States government. The failed coup attempt at the hands of Trump dummies, hundreds of insurrectionists that stormed the United States Capitol building, attacked our democracy, attempted to overturn a settled, free, and fair election here in America. And the House Select Committee that is investigating the events of that day, in a concerted effort to ensure it doesn't happen again, to possibly appropriate money for security or some kind of a counterintelligence operation to monitor extremist groups. Who knows what kind of answers they'll come to. But yesterday, I talked about the fact that they issued 6 subpoenas. And then later in the day, 10 more were issued. Before I get to this article from the New York Times, this one right here, I'll put it up. At the Willard and the White House, the January 6th panel widens its net. What went on at a 5-star hotel near the White House the day before the riot could be a window into how Trump-directed plot to upend the election ended in violence at the Capitol. Before I get to that, though, I have been railing, we'll say, against the slow pace, the seeming inaction on the part of Merrick Garland. And I would love to be here to apologize. I would love to be here today to say, maybe I was a little premature in my criticism. But I cannot do that because it is nothing but crickets from the Justice Department while Steve Bannon's criminal contempt, the forwarding of that from Congress, the vote that forwarded it to the Justice Department. What has happened with that? Merrick Garland, what has happened with that? He did an interview, or at a press conference, he answered a question, and he said, well, it's going through the system in the normal course. We're handling it normally like we handle everything else. That would be fine if this was a normal matter. But this is an existential threat to the future and the security and the existence of our democracy. Mr. Attorney General, it takes priority. What are you doing? If you're not going to do your job, step down from your job so someone can take the job and do it correctly, with vigor, with dedication and honor, and loyalty to not only the Constitution of these United States, to which you swore an oath, but to the country itself. I'm going to read from this article. On Tuesday, the committee announced 10 new subpoenas that seem to expand the aperture of the inquiry even further, seeking information from top officials in Mr. Trump's White House, including, and then they give like 2 names in this New York Times article. So I went to another article, and I'm going to read you all the names and who they are. Here are the others. Former senior advisor Stephen Miller and former White House press secretary Kayleigh McEnany, as well as Tim McAtee, former White House personnel director who was reportedly with Trump on the day of the attack, so he will have intimate knowledge of the if not the mindset, certainly what was said, who Donald Trump called, and what he said to them. Nicholas Luna, Trump's former personal assistant. Molly Michael, a former special assistant allegedly involved in spreading Trump's election lies. Benjamin Williamson, a presidential aide who allegedly attempted to convince Trump to condemn the violence. Keith Kellogg, former national security advisor to Vice President Mike Pence. Christopher Liddell, former White House deputy chief of staff. Cassidy Hutchinson, a former presidential assistant for legislative affairs. And Kenneth Klukowski, who worked for the Attorney General's office and was allegedly part of the plot to urge certain state legislators to delay their election certification process. It's, again, a cadre of co-conspirators who acted in bad faith in an attempt to subvert our democracy. In the past 2 days alone, the panel has nearly doubled the number of subpoenas it has issued, bringing the total to 35. Let me pause there. Again, we're going to go back to the Steve Bannon thing. Does it matter how many subpoenas are issued if there is no consequence for those who defy them? Because a signal is being sent to all 35, 34 if you don't count Steve Bannon. A message is being sent to them that who cares? You don't have to adhere, abide by a legally issued subpoena. Who cares? You're being compelled to testimony by the House of Representatives, by the Congress of the United States of America. Who cares? Nothing's going to happen. Look at Steve Bannon. He defied it. Nothing's going on. Merrick Garland's over there in his office sitting on his hands. A message needs to be sent that justice will be sought. It will be meted out. What are you doing, Merrick Garland? In recent weeks, the committee has hired new investigators, pored over thousands of documents, and heard privately from a stream of voluntary witnesses, from rally planners and former Trump officials to rioters themselves. More than 150 witnesses have been interviewed, some of whom surprised investigators by proactively contacting the committee to testify, according to two people familiar with the investigation who described the confidential inquiry on the condition of anonymity. The panel has learned details about how Stop the Steal rally organizers used deception to obtain permits from the Capitol Police to hold rallies near the Capitol, how Mr. Trump and White House officials coordinated with organizers of the rally, whose attendees would later storm the Capitol, and how deeply Mr. Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, was involved in pushing false claims of widespread election fraud. False claims, conspiracy theories, in an attempt to overturn an election, a free and fair and completed election in which Joe Biden, like it or not, won. Working out of a nondescript office building at the bottom of Capitol Hill, the committee's investigators have divided themselves into color-coded teams to pursue several avenues of inquiry. They are looking into these things. The money trail. Investigators are scrutinizing the groups that funded the protests that preceded the violence, which involved rioters from at least 44 states and promoted and spread lies online that helped radicalize the crowd. They're looking into planning meetings. The panel is pressing for answers about gatherings at the Willard and other Washington hotels where Mr. Trump's allies were involved in the effort to overturn the election, including Steve Bannon, Mr. Giuliani, and Mr. Eastman. They met for hours before the riot. What would they be meeting about? What would there be to meet about for hours in the command center, the war room of the insurrection, the attempted coup attempt? They are also looking into foreknowledge of violence. The most difficult piece of the investigation involves unearthing evidence that Mr. Trump or anyone in his inner circle had foreknowledge that violence was a possibility on January 6th, and whether they took any steps to either encourage or discourage the storming of the Capitol. Mr. Bannon, whom the House voted to hold in criminal contempt of Congress for defying a subpoena from the committee, predicted on his podcast a day before the riot that, quote, all hell is going to break loose tomorrow. How would he know? It is because it was initiated, it was planned, it was organized, and it was executed that way. You don't show up to a Stop the Steal rally and then just so happen to have the lumber and the nails and the wherewithal to construct a hangman's gallows on the lawn of the Capitol unless you're there to seek the death of the vice president. Think about how that would work. What political rally have you ever been to where you could have constructed a hangman's gallows? that takes premeditation, forethought, planning, and execution and motivation to get it done. It is a nonsense argument that does not hold water that this was an impromptu event, that things just got carried away. Absolutely not. What do you think, though? I'd love to know. You can call, leave me a brief voicemail, 714-576-4054. Of course, you can email me daily at dollemore.com. Thank you for your time and attention. Thanks for liking and commenting and subscribing to the channel, sharing the videos. Goes a long way towards supporting the channel and having YouTube do some of the heavy lifting of promoting the videos and growing the channel. Anyway, if you appreciate what I do, I realize that I'm not for everybody, as they say. But if I'm for you, and you want to be for me, look at this, we're all for everybody. Click the join button below this video. See what's involved in becoming a channel member. For as little as $1.99 a month, you can support my work, help produce my work here. Or you can go over to patreon.com/IDoubtItPodcast. That's another way to help support my work here on YouTube, not just for the podcast. Which, by the way, we just started filming on a regular basis. We're going to be putting those up on YouTube so you can check out the podcast. It's not just here on YouTube. It's actually more traditionally been listened to over the course of the last almost 8 years. 755 episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, everywhere you find podcasts. Well, I'd love for you to subscribe. Other than that, I'll see you next time. Until then, be genuine. Take care of one another.